Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to give folks just 30 seconds to continue joining our webinar today. So give us a couple seconds and we're going to go ahead and get started. All right. Good morning. My name is Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez. I'm a policy analyst here at UC Davis ITS, the Institute of Transportation Studies, and I'll be facilitating today's discussion. Today, I am joined by my colleagues at the EV Research Center. I have here a Ph.D. student, Lu Dong, with her advisor, Dr. Scott Hardman. The question that we are tackling today is, where do EV drivers want to fast charge? The transition to zero-emission vehicles is fastly accelerating, but the widespread adoption will require a fast charging network that is convenient, that is reliable, and that is tailored to the driver's needs. Today's webinar, we're going to be exploring groundbreaking research that quantifies how EV drivers are really thinking about things like charging speed, costs, things like restroom and other amenities that are available to them. This research will uncover how drivers make trade-offs between time, costs, location features, and also take a look at some of the factors that influence their decisions, such as income, the range of a vehicle, and how those shape their decisions. We believe that these insights are going to be important and critical to people like charging providers, policymakers, and businesses that are trying to optimize the infrastructure investments and really improve the user experience for EV drivers. Today's agenda is we're going to start with a presentation by Lou. Then we're going to go into a quick overview with Scott, followed by a discussion with some questions that we've had. And then we're going to shift to questions from the virtual audience. We want to remind folks that this session is being recorded and will be available on our ITS Davis webpage, on our NCST webpage, and on the EV Research Center webpage as well. There is closed captioning available, and feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box. We'll try to get to most of them at the end of the discussion here. All right, with that, we're going to dive into today's presentation. We're going to start off with my colleague here to my left, Lu. Take it away.
Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. Hope you are all doing well. My name is Lu Dong. I'm a PhD student in Transportation Technology and Policy program. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share our research with you today. I'll be presenting our study on preference for DC fast charging based on a stated preference survey conducted in California. This topic is especially important right now as California has been developing its fast charging infrastructure. Our goal of this research is to support the development of infrastructure that people actually want to use and also help charger providers to achieve a higher utilization rates, which is a key to obtain sustainable daily operation and revenue. According to IEA Global EV Outlook 2024, the number of public EV chargers has been increasing, especially DC fast charger. In 2024, California has established 0.18 million public chargers, including nearly 17,000 DC fast chargers. However, we face a challenge that cannot be overlooked. The ratio of BEV to fast chargers continue to increase, which means more and more BEVs have to share one DC fast charger. For example, in 2023, around 87 BEVs share one DC fast charger in California. That means more public chargers, especially DC fast chargers, are needed. BEV owners typically rely on 3 charging locations, including home charging, charging at workplace, charging at public place. When it comes to short distance trip, those routine daily commutes, home and workplace charging serve as the predominant charging locations. And in our survey data, around 94% of the respondents reported that they have access to charge either at or near home. However, the picture changes significantly for long-distance trips. Those non-routine trips exceeding 150 miles, for example, from Davis to LA, the DC fast charger become essential, which allows drivers to quickly recharge and continue their journeys with minimal delay. Our research delves into charging behavior for routine and non-routine trips separately, since these trip types involve different charging choice, as shown in the previous slide. And we try to understand the routine charging behavior through descriptive analysis and inform DC fast charging infrastructure development through choice experiment data. And for a long-distance trip, we would like to know what is consumers' preference for fast charging and how much consumers are willing to pay for additional service, and what factors can increase charging utilization. In our choice experiments, we want to standardize the impact of state of charge. We assume the battery has only 20% remaining and must recharge it to 80%. And we totally have 7 attributes in our choice experiments, including charger type, charging cost per 100 mile, charging time per 100 mile, driving detour time, chance of waiting for charger, typical wait time, and also facilities. Here, charging time per 100 mile represents the charging power. If the charging time is lower, means a higher charging power. For example, the charging time of 5 minutes means the highest charging power. And the respondents would also see the total charging time and total charging cost based on the charging range and also charging cost time per 100 miles in our survey. Here is our research methodology. In total, we have 1266 respondents started the survey and 1086 respondents completed the survey. And they finished the details on charging experience and also deliver a DC fast charging experiments. And then when convert the experiment data into panel data, totally have 4408 observations. And we deliver a mixed logic model based on choice data and calculate the willingness to pay. Each respondent in our survey participates in 4 choice experiments, where each choice sites consists of 2 unlabeled options, choice A and choice B. And here is one screenshot of our choice experiment. Assume you are making long distance trip in your BEV make. For example, it is Volkswagen. And you started a journey with 80% charge and have driven 162 miles, and the battery now is at 20% capacity. You have only 54 miles left, and you must charge to reach your destination. And the following are 2 options with fast chargers are nearby. Which one you would choose? So these 2 unlabeled option is charging location A and charging location B, but they have different attributes. For example, they have different charging type, different charging cost, and different total charging time, detour time, chance of waiting, typical wait time, and also facilities. And based on the difference of these attributes, the respondents would choose the option they would prefer. Here is our results for a descriptive summary. This is our socio-demographic statistics, including gender, age, house type, household income, and also employment status. This is a typical sample of EV owners. Most are male, higher income, middle-aged, single-family home. This sample is not representative to the general population in California, since the respondents are all EV owners. Most of them are BEV owners, some of them are Ph.D. owners. As previously discussed, about 94% respondents reported home charging access at or near their home, and the most common home charging location is an attached garage followed by a driveway. The predominant charging setup of home charging is level 2, around 6 to 7 kilowatt, which typically take around 10 hours to deliver 60 kilowatt hour to an EV. And for routine trips, home charging dominates the charging choice, with most respondents, around 64% respondents charge exclusive at or near their home, and 20% mostly charge at home, while only 3% charge exclusively away from home. So it's very important for the home charging availability. We also tested the location of DC fast charging without home charging access. For DC fast charging, drivers prefer the rest stops during the trips and also destination they frequently travel to, such as shopping malls, public parking garage, and restaurants. In addition, we also tested what if questions. If there is no home charging, how the charging behavior and driving behavior will change. The data told us, although more than half of adopters say that they agree there is plenty of charging options to replace home charging, but most people have concerns about the inconvenience and also the higher cost of non-home charging. Around 84% concerned about the inconvenience and 66% concerned about the cost. And also around 43% would also rethink their decision to own an BEV. And here is our model based on our choice experiment data. This is how we measure people charging choice based on the charging experiments. We rely on typical random utility maximization approach, including utility function, and also we include the elasticity into the utility function, including income, BEV range. And we totally run 2 models in our research, one with label effect and the other one without effect. And we found out that the respondents prefer the DC fast charger, which is labeled as ultra fast, which means a higher power and presence of restroom, convenience store, coffee shop, restaurant, and outdoor play area, especially for those respondents who have a longer charging time, just like larger than 9 minutes, the facility effect is much higher. However, the factors such as charging cost per 100 mile, charging time per 100 mile, detour time, chance of waiting, typical wait time have a negative impact on the charging choice. So based on our logic regression results, and we calculate the willingness to pay for each attributes. Willingness to pay is a way to measure drivers' preference for each attribute through monetary dollars. It provides how much respondents would like to pay for additional service such as shorter charging time labeled as ultra fast, and also avoidance of waiting time. Here we have a list of dollars willingness to pay for 100 miles for each attributes. And then we draw the willingness to pay contour line for 1 minute reduction in charging time. The willingness to pay for reducing charging time is elastic with respect to both household income and BEV range, and it is more sensitive to BEV range than the household income. For example, we can see the red line. If we fix the household income to $200,000 per year, the willingness to pay for 200 miles BEV range is 36 cents, while the willingness to pay for 300 BEV range is 46 cents. It's much higher. However, if we fix the BEV range to around to 30 miles, just like the black line, the we need to pay for 200,000 income, and for 3,000 income is almost the same. And because previously we calculate the we need to pay per 100 miles, but it may be not so clear to understand the we need to pay. So we convert it to we need to pay per kilowatt hour. And we find out that people willing to pay 11 cents more per kilowatt hour for label as ultra fast, just like for higher power. And people would like to pay 3 cents more per kilowatt hour for increasing power from 150 to 200 kilowatt hour, but it is not linear. For context, in Davis, the DC fast charging price is around 56 cents per kilowatt hour, and the power is around 350 kilowatt. And respondents would like to pay 2 cents more per kilowatt hour for 1 minute reduction in detour time, and 1.5 more per kilowatt hour for 1 minute reduction in wait time at the charger. And they would like to pay 4.2 more per kilowatt hour to use a charger with no chance of waiting. And specifically, they would like to pay 11.2 more kilowatt hour to charge at a location with a combination of restroom, coffee shops, and outdoor area, particularly when the charging time exceeds 9 minutes. And in conclusion, around 94.5% of our respondents in our survey have access to home charging, and 64% of respondents charging exclusively at home, and most respondents show concerns on charging convenience and charging cost if there is no home charging access. And the willingness to pay per kilowatt hour increased significantly with improvements in charging speed, reliability, and amenities, reaching up to 12 cents per kilowatt hour for locations offering restrooms, coffee shops, outdoor play area for those respondents who charge longer than 9 minutes, which would also bring the profits revenue for the charger operator from operates the facility. Among the respondents with the same income levels, those with longer range BEV are willing to pay more for the shorter charging and detour times. And following, Scott will talk more about the business case for EV charging.
Thanks, Lou. Before I talk about how we think this relates to a business case for EV charging, I just want to summarize some of Lou's points and some of the results. I think it's relatively intuitive what we found here. People prefer more powerful chargers. They want to be able to charge their vehicle more quickly. People prefer chargers where they don't have to wait as much, which means things like having more charging outlets per station. It means interventions like idle fees, or potentially caps in terms of the percent you can charge to. And as well, people want chargers that are closer to their travel routes. I think one important and interesting finding that relates to the business case for EV charging is this how the presence of amenities like cafes and restaurants relates to people's choices. So I want to talk about that briefly. So basically, we see that people prefer to choose chargers that have places like cafes, restaurants, convenience stores. And so if you have that, you potentially get higher charging station utilization. You can potentially charge more for the energy that you're selling, and you also potentially have some additional source of revenue, which you can maybe use to offset some of these sort of investments you need for these chargers. So I want to talk a little bit briefly about this study. This was a recent study published by myself and Alan Jen. Lou also contributed, and we had some other co-authors, David Bunch, Priya Chakraborty, and Stefan Mabi. And so in this study, we looked at the stated preferences, and we also looked at real utilization data of chargers. And we wanted to look at in that report whether or not we think chargers are sort of viable business models in terms of can they recover the cost of that initial investment. And so using some very optimistic assumptions that a charger costs around $30,000 to install, which is optimistic because we know the installation costs can go anywhere from $30,000 to $400,000. We used real utilization data. We assumed that the rate paid for electricity by the provider is about 11 cents, and they're selling electricity for somewhere between 37 and 52 cents per kilowatt hour. And we also had a discount rate. But even under these very optimistic assumptions, a charger would not recover the initial capital investment just by selling electricity in less than 10 years. It was far more than 10 years. And so, if some chargers cost 10 times this amount, you can imagine what that does to the payback period. And I think that's important because, similar to gas stations, where for a gas station, about 40% of the profits comes from selling things other than gas, right? It comes from every gas station you go to has a convenience store. If it doesn't, it's based in like a Costco, and people are spending money there. So we are starting to think that that is going to be the most viable way to recover costs. You cannot make that much money by selling electricity. And even compared to a gas station, right? If every minute a gas pump is pumping fuel, that's about $25 worth of gas. Every minute an EV charger, even a fast charger, is charging a car, that's about $2. So it's just very difficult to recover these high capital costs without exploring other options to recover that revenue. That is without policy support. If you have policy support that can cover a lot of the capital costs, you can be in a better situation. And so the stuff Lou was talking about was a stated preference study. We're asking people how they might behave. In this report, we also looked at how people do behave. And so this here is just a map. It's Santa Monica. You have a charger here, this little black dot. And so using this utilization data, we looked at the relationship between station utilization and the presence of amenities to try and see if this finding that Lou spoke about, that people want to use chargers that have amenities, we wanted to see if that applies to the real world. And we saw that was the case. And so, one thing we found was that for every nearby restaurant, you get about 2.7 more charging events per month, which doesn't sound like much. But in this map here, there's about 15 restaurants. So that's about 45 more charging sessions every single month, about 1.5 charging sessions more per day, which also doesn't sound like much, but charging station utilization rates are pretty low at the moment. However, in this scenario, this charging provider is unlikely to be capturing any of this expenditure when people are going to the station, right? Most EV chargers today are chargers installed in parking lots, around amenities, but those amenities are not currently sort of owned by the charging operator, or there's not this sort of like symbiotic relationship. So we think things like this. I just took a couple of snapshots from news articles announcing this is a charging station with I think it has 40 charging outlets, and it's paired with a high-end grocery store. It's in Southern California, and then this is Iona, a new charging company, where their concept is they'll have charging stations, but also a cafe. And so, we're starting to think this sort of idea where you pair selling electricity with selling something else like coffee, food, and so on. We're starting to think like that will start to make more sense. And some kind of very early results we have where we're sending diaries to EV owners to see what they do while they charge. And it's looking like people spend as much or more on coffee, food, whatever, than they do on electricity. So there does appear to be some good potential to generate additional revenue by selling other things than electricity. And again, this applies for long distance trips, right? We're talking about long distance trips. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about people's routine behavior. People routinely want to be able to charge at places where it's cheaper, like home, work, and so on. But on long trips, people are captive. They are doing things that are less common, so they may be willing to spend more money on additional things. Yeah, I think that's it. I just want to acknowledge the funders from this research. So we had two funders for this project. One was Next 10 Foundation, and the other was the National Center for Sustainable Transportation. And then I also want to just highlight all of our co-authors. So Lou, was the lead author for this project, but we also worked with David Bunch, Deborah Priya-Chakraborty, and Stefan Mabby. And yes, I think that's everything.
Excellent. Sean, this is such a unique study because people are willing to find these charging stations that have these amenities. But in your particular study, what you want to do is really pinpoint what is it exactly, what is the amount, the monetary value that people place on some of these amenities. And with that, I think we can start with our poll question. We have a poll question for our virtual audience here. We want to know if you're an EV driver, or perhaps you will be an EV driver in the future, which of the following amenities would you choose at a specific location over others if they are available? In other words, which of these would you prioritize? And we can get some live results here. Obviously, some of these are more pressing and important than others. Some people rely a lot on Wi-Fi and other things with regards to connectivity, and some of these may be a little bit more important for you if you are an EV driver. So we can let that kind of marinate there for a bit, and we come back to those results. These are live, so we'll be able to see them as they come in. I do want to start off with sort of a high-level question for Lou and Scott here. And I think maybe this is a question that a lot of folks are thinking, and this is, do we envision a future in which the ecosystem where EVs operate is going to be very much like the gas station plus convenience store equivalent? Is that the direction that we're going to? Why or why not?
I think with the caveat of for long distance trips, yes, potentially, right? Because people are on a long trip in an EV, they're probably always going to have slightly more time available compared to like filling a gas car. And so we do think that on long distance trips, people are going to want some place where they can relax, get some refreshments, spend some time while they're waiting for their vehicle to recharge. We don't think that's going to be a replacement for home charging. People very much prefer home charging. It's cheaper, it's more convenient. Public fast charging is always probably going to be slightly more expensive than that. But we do think for long distance trips, some sort of relationship between like a cafe, restaurant, and a fast charger is going to be make a lot of sense.
Yeah. I also think the combination of grocery stores, like also restrooms with fast charging, also can provide the charger providers an additional revenue to make a profit, like to have a sustainable operation of fast charger.
Excellent. There is a lot of questions that are popping up here in our Q&A box. Thank you both. We're gonna try to get to some of these questions. What we try to do is we try to get back to folks via email if we don't get to one of your questions, but maybe just some questions specifically about the research itself that people want to know. Some folks were asking with regards to the actual distance that you were considering. Perhaps the most interesting question here is with regards to for ultra fast charging speed, is there less WTP preference for shopping close by or for shorter dwell times? So the question really is focusing on with regards to the space and proximity to things. So what is it that folks are really wanting to get to when they're within a particular charging location? What is one amenity that is really critical to folks in this study?
Like, is the question, did we see a difference in willingness to pay for like a bathroom versus a cafe or a convenience store?
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, we saw just generally the more amenities, people were willing to pay more, right? With the lowest willingness to pay in terms of amenities was for just restrooms. And then we saw higher willingness to pay when there was restrooms, convenience stores, and like an outdoor space to kind of like, wander around.
Yes, if there is only additional convenience store, the willingness to pay is almost the same with available of restroom only. So will be higher willingness to pay if there is additional coffee shop, restaurant, green outdoor play area. They would like to pay more for that. Yeah.
So there's questions about the opportunities for in terms of where the hierarchy is for charging. And Scott, you mentioned this already, but obviously this particular study focuses on these long distance trips, but the key for a lot of folks here is still that home charging. Can you talk a little bit more about that kind of hierarchy? Because there's a lot of questions that are tackling that. What about home charging, right? Home
Yeah.
charging is still that one critical piece.
Yeah, I think like home charging or some place you go regularly and spend a decent amount of time, like you dwell there for long. Yeah, like workplace charging. That has and probably always will be the foundation of like EV charging, right? And yeah, I mean, we kind of looked at this in this study, and we asked EV drivers what the implications would be of them not having home chargers, and a lot of them told us that they would rethink their ownership of an electric vehicle. We also see in studies that people who don't have home charging are more likely to discontinue owning an EV. Because they're concerned about the cost and the convenience of not being able to charge from home. So yeah, it's obviously very difficult to get home charging access for everybody, but that's something that is going to be very important as we move towards 100% EV sales. We have to start looking at solutions to people who live in apartments, people who park on the street. How do we get them some access to charging while they're at home?
We have a shot. Hey.
I think.
No problem.
Yes.
I want to also ask this about the study that you did, Lou. As you were doing this research and you began to have these findings, was there any specific piece or any finding that you thought was very interesting, important? Obviously, for purpose of the research, you want to make sure that you continue tackling your own research question. But was there something that you found in the research that you thought this would be something for future research? This could be another question that could come out, and opportunities for more research around this idea of charging behavior. What are some interesting things that you might want to continue diving into and you just didn't have the time?
Oh yeah. Just like when we comes to the ways to pay per kilowatt hour, we mentioned that in Davis, the DC fast charger, the price of DC fast charging right now is around 56 cents, and the power is 350 kilowatt hour. And I'm wondering whether how we can use our willingness to pay based on our study and to make a to use this as a model and apply it to each region. It's like apply it to Davis, to Sacramento, to different cities, and based on their scenario, and we can give a real actual recommendation about the pricing things in the future research.
Excellent.
Yeah.
More research to come.
Hopefully.
I'm wondering if we can try this. Ali, I'm gonna tell you if we want to have somebody ask their question verbally. And I see an interesting question here from Jimmy. Jimmy, if you're Jimmy O'Day, if you are in a position where you can ask your question verbally, we can unmute you and we can let you ask your question live. Jimmy. Well, the question from Jimmy is, how do you see this research informing estimated needs for public level 2 versus DC fast chargers?
I don't think this is the right survey or method to do that. I think what you can use this for is informing like the design of fast charging stations and like where those need to be, rather than answering questions on like how many level 2 chargers do we need versus how many fast chargers do we need.
Yeah, because we focus on the long distance trip and focus on the DC fast charger experiment. So we didn't compare this level 2 and DC fast charger in our research.
Nice. Maybe more of a policy question. Maybe this one's for you, Scott. One of the things that is going to be important in this transition is the role of regulatory agencies, folks that have decision-making power. And there was a question at the very top with regards to incentives. I saw that at the very top of the queue here. What role do you see for these types of regulatory bodies, whether that's government agencies or other entities? What role do these have in incentivizing the right mix of cost, speed, maybe availability of amenities around public infrastructure, public charging locations for EV drivers?
Yeah, I mean, in funding for chargers, there are often requirements about the number of charging outlets. There are requirements about reliability. I guess it's possible that we could introduce requirements that encourage those installing chargers to consider how are they going to make money and continue to operate this station after public funding goes away. So we could have requirements that encourage even more chargers per station. I think right now in NEVI funding there has to be 4. Maybe that could be 8, which would people would maybe use that more because there's less chance of waiting. And I think they could encourage providers to consider how are you going to recover these costs, produce enough revenue to maintain the charger, and going into the future through other business models. That would be something interesting, I think.
And maybe just a follow-up question, because I asked you this, but I didn't ask you. You were part of this research as well as the advisor. Any interesting findings, Scott, from this particular research that you thought is a future question and opportunity for more research as these findings were beginning to be uncovered?
No, I do think the results are kind of intuitive, right? It makes sense that people want to save, they want to charge in a shorter amount of time, they want to do a shorter detour, they don't like to wait for a charger. I think the thing that is interesting about this study compared to other studies is that we looked at this effect of amenities. I think that's just something we want to highlight, that does appear to be something people want. They want chargers with amenities, and we see that in both the stated preference study and in the real data. So maybe as well as intuitive, but I think having evidence to show that is important.
Thank you. There is a few questions here at the top about how did you find waiting risk or typical wait times for chargers? So this is a very specific question about the research.
That is that the waiting, our findings related to waiting time as well come from this stated choice experiment. And we told people there was anywhere between 0 and I think 15 minutes of waiting. And so we just sort of showed people how long they would have to wait, and then we observe what they choose. We are doing other research at Davis where we are testing the reliability of EV charging. Basically sending a bunch of students around the state in EVs to use different charging stations. And part of that is recording wait time and things like that. So that kind of study would be more appropriate to estimate the actual amount of time people have to wait to charge. We don't observe actual wait time.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing up this other research project, and want to just share a little bit more about that for folks for future webinar opportunities. That as part of the EV Center work that we do is trying to better understand chargers in the wild, how reliable these exist, this ecosystem is for EV drivers. And as Scott mentioned, there is quite a lot of effort going on there to try to understand the current status of these EV chargers that are across the state. I'm gonna see if Scott or Lou, there's anything that is popping up here in the Q&A box that you want to address, because I know there's quite a few, and I'm having trouble as it's filling up. If there's anything that you want to tackle here in the Q&A box, and also that my colleagues here that are helping us know how the poll is going, Because I know the poll has been live for a couple minutes now.
Oh wait, I guess we can discuss the poll.
So I think not very surprised, but yes, definitely clean amenities, such as restrooms, is something that is important for folks. For those of us that spend a lot of time on the road, I think this is a key aspect of being on the road. Make sure you have access to those amenities. Anything that jumps out here from this poll?
Kind of, I mean, we didn't ask about Wi-Fi, but kind of relates to what we found too, right?
Yeah.
One question I think is interesting is Mike Nicholas asked if we can comment on the relationship between battery size and charging speed, and we did see a relationship there. So we saw drivers with larger batteries or longer EV driving ranges had a higher willingness to pay for higher power chargers. And that's because they would be at the charger for a longer period of time because their battery's larger, it takes longer to charge, and so they are more willing to pay more for a faster charger to get that time down, which I think is kind of interesting. Another question we had is there a difference in willingness to pay by time of day? From Kelly Hoopland, one of our recent graduates. And we didn't test that, but that I think would be interesting to look at, right? If people maybe at night they are
Yes, exactly.
Want to get home quicker, or worried about safety or something.
And also, I saw some research focused on the state of charge, so like the remaining of battery. If the remaining battery is very low, they may willing to pay more. And also the state of charge also influence the willingness to pay. Yeah, we can further to discuss the dynamic willingness to pay based on the time of day and also the state of charge to draw the dynamic willingness to pay based on our study.
Excellent. Yeah, very, very interesting findings with all of this. With the work that you're doing, obviously, this is an opportunity for also future research that you're trying to dive into. I want to hopefully get back to this original question as we're going into this electrified future and this ecosystem. It's going to hopefully work in the same way that maybe we have gas stations. There is maybe a concern that as we're going into that next phase of electrification, are there some initial challenges that maybe in this research or other research that you see that we should start thinking about as far as this electrified future with the specific context of long-term driving, right? Because the focus of your research was specifically on these long trips, but is there something that you already maybe see as a challenge or a problem within this ecosystem that we maybe need to start thinking about as those folks that are interested in this work?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the problem of public charging and having a reliable and available and convenient to use network of public chargers is going to get more important over time. Right now, most EV drivers, they have two vehicles. Often that second vehicle is a gas car. And so, in many cases, people don't have to take an EV on a long trip. But as we approach, go past 100% EV sales and approach 100% EV adoption, right? Everybody owns an EV. It's going to be more and more important to have this network of publicly available fast charging stations nailed down so that people can do all of the travel easily and conveniently. And I think another thing that's really important from this research, just generally, is that chargers need to be able to ideally recover the capital costs, but definitely cover operating costs. If the revenue from charging does not cover operating costs, providers will have no motivation to keep that station open, right? And there are requirements in NEVI that chargers have to stay open for so many years. I don't recall off the top of my head what it is, but we need to be making sure that these stations are at least covering enough, if they're publicly funded, at least covering enough of the operating costs to stay open so that they do stay open and are available for people to use. I think that's like the most important thing to me. It's like we want to make sure these investments that we're putting in to build this network stay and that infrastructure does not just sort of become abandoned. And so I think that's why we have to think about this business case right now. We don't want to just publicly fund infrastructure, and then when those requirements run out of how many years you have to keep it open, the providers just abandon it. So that's, I think, one really important thing going into the future. And I think another thing related to charging is what do we do for households who cannot charge at home? I think we need to do a lot more there, because we know that home charging is convenient, and we know that if people don't have it, they aren't interested in an EV. We know that if they don't have it and they bought an EV, they're likely to abandon that EV. And so I think, more, in addition to more work on public fast charging, more work on this question of what do we do for people who don't have a home charger. Those are kind of like the two things I think about quite a lot.
Yeah. For the operating cost of DC fast charging stations, I did a case study in China about the Tesla fast charging stations, and I noticed that most of the public charging of Tesla in China, they have some cooperation with the locations, just like have the cooperation with the shopping malls to help them to have a better profit. Like they will give them, just like the shopping mall will give Tesla a free rent fees. They do not need to pay for the rent fee, but they share the charging fees together, or some other solutions to make profit. Yeah, I think it can be a hint for us for the future establishment of public charging. So
yeah, we continue to find and uncover new opportunities, not just for future research, but to prepare this ecosystem with policy changes, with better infrastructure for an EV ecosystem that is functional, that really helps EV drivers. There is a question here. Perhaps this is somebody that is working on a particular business case. There's a question here that is asking about any insights on the types of adjacent businesses. So I'm assuming what types of vendors can be well matched with DC fast chargers that match with a dwell time that is between 20 to 40 minutes. So a very specific time frame of 20 to 40 minutes. And what would be like a good match with regards to the businesses that are around a charging station that can match that time frame?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the question is 20 to 40 minutes because that's often how long people charge for. And the answer depends on like where the amenity is, right? If the amenity, you have to walk through town to get to it, and it's a restaurant, like you're not going to walk 10 minutes across town, sit down, start having a meal and be like, oh, now I need to go back to my car and move. But if that restaurant is right next to the station, maybe you'll quickly nip out, move the car and go back to resume the activity. And so it depends like what you're doing and how close it is. I think the closer the amenity, cafe, restaurant, whatever is to the station, the less it matters because you can just quickly pause, move the car, go back in. But for when it's like, further away or a walk, then it has to be shorter duration things, right? Like a coffee, a convenience store, rather than like sitting down and having a meal.
Yeah.
No worries.
This is a good question though, because I think
it's a good question.
It gets to like pairing charging speeds with dwell times and activity durations. Like maybe like grocery shopping, right? If that takes you an hour, you don't want to have like a 350 kilowatt fast charger that's done in 15 minutes, right? Because then you go like, what are you going to do? Like leave your shopping cart in the middle of the store, run out, move your car, go back in. So I think there is something to be said here, thinking about like how do we pair charging power with activity dwell times. Which I think it's a good thing to think about.
Yeah. There's this good comment here that folks have mentioned about dwell times near recreation areas, and perhaps maybe slow charging speeds at recreation areas where folks are going to spend, they're going to go on a long hike or a long walk, and maybe having that matching that needs to happen between the activities that are around it and the potential dwell times for a charging location.
Yeah. We shouldn't put fast chargers at trailheads, right?
Exactly.
There should be slow chargers.
Exactly.
Yes.
There is a hand up, I think. Um, wondering if that is a question from somebody's hand up. Aaron Wimberly, you can go ahead and unmute so that we can hear your question live, and we're gonna try to tackle it here amongst the three of us. So, you want to go
Hey,
ahead and ask your question live?
thank you. Yeah, can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. Yeah, thanks so much for the study. I work in this industry and we're always trying to figure out where the best place to put chargers are. I was just curious. I think, Lou, that I heard you say that people are willing to pay more for charging
Mhm.
that meets their needs, basically, whatever that need may be. Um, we have run into issues where we can't. We work in California, all over the US. So there are some instances in which people cannot upcharge on a utility set rate. So I was curious how y'all propose to kind of like have that competitive pricing or that higher pricing to draw people into certain areas.
So you're saying that the kilowatt hours sold by the provider is capped by the utility in which the operator is based.
Correct. Yeah, and
Yeah.
Dahlia pointed out that sometimes it's the regulatory board, such as CPUC or whomever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was just curious how y'all were kind of working through that piece.
Yeah, I guess that's a difficult thing to answer. The kind of the study though didn't. It's not like we're using this willingness to pay to say like, oh, the charger
The
downtown in
pricing.
Davis is 56
Yeah,
cents
it's
a
not.
kilowatt hour. You can charge more. It's more. I think we should use it to think about like current pricing and if people will choose that charger, right? Like for some reason the charger in Vacaville is 64. It's Electrify America as well. So one in Davis is 64 cents a kilowatt hour. The one in Davis is 56. And so I think like using the pricing strategies to think about the results to think about where people will choose to go is more the case until or potentially using the results to communicate with CPUC or whoever sets those requirements on like, look, we think there's a case for selling this electricity for slightly more because we have a station that has high utilization, high power charges. There's a lot of amenities nearby. We think people are going to continue to use it even if we charge slightly more. So maybe the results can also help inform policy changes. Not that I'm advocating charging more for electricity because it's still fast charging rates are quite expensive compared to home.
Any thoughts, Lou, on that?
Yeah, it's hard to say the charging price based on our willingness to pay. It's like it's a comparisons based on other variables are the same, and if there is additional dining room, or additional coffee shop, the people would like to pay more. Yeah, it is hard to say the specific pricing things.
Aaron, thank you for your question. Getting close here to time, and I want to get back to this last piece that you mentioned here, Scott, about perhaps what is it that folks should take away from this research. Yeah, and that's maybe a quick spitfire question. What is one key takeaway from this work, from this research that y'all been doing, that you'd like either charging providers, policymakers, automakers, or operators of EV charging stations? What is one key takeaway from this work that you would like them to take away from this and maybe act immediate?
There are comments about this, about the importance of home. I think that's something we want to highlight, that whenever we talk about charging, we should think about home or some long dwell time destination as the foundational location for charging. Obviously, we're talking about public charging. That's what this research project is about. But just remember, home, destination, work, that is the foundation of charging. And I think the finding specific to public fast charging is the importance of amenities in people's choices and the potential for those amenities to provide some additional revenue to charging providers. I think that to me is the biggest takeaway here, that if you have a cafe or something, people are more likely to charge there, and maybe you can also capture some additional revenue, which can help create a more profitable charging station.
Lou, I'll take a quick moment here first to say thank you, because I know this is a big part of your work, your dissertation work. Congratulations on that as well. From this work that you've been involved with, what is one major key takeaway that you wish charging providers, policymakers, or automakers can take away from this work and maybe start making some decisions?
Yeah, it's like let me think. I really interested in the key funding with willingness to pay with additional label as ultra fast, and also with additional facilities with dining rooms and also coffee shops. I think for the charging power label as ultra fast, and also it will be, people would be more attractive for this label. But for policy side, I'm not sure the key takeaway, but for the industry side, I think it's a really good strategy to design their DC fast charging.
Thank you.
Just one additional thought.
I
think it was talking. We know from this other research project we have that charging stations are not as reliable as gas stations. And I think like one of the underlying reasons for that is because it's not profitable to sell electricity. Station operators don't have this motivation that gas station operators do to keep that gas station functioning well and reliable for everybody, right? If we can help identify this business case, the operators are going to want to bring more and more people there to sell more and more electricity and more additional stuff. So I think if we can identify this sort of business case for EV charging, maybe that also has a knock-on effect of making chargers more reliable, because there is a much greater motivation to keep those stations bringing people in to charge, and also buy coffee and chips and Powerade or whatever.
Somebody just put here in the chat, most charging locations do not have simple amenities like a bench or chairs just to sit while they're waiting to charge.
It's true. Like, I often, like, there's no trash cans, like, maybe, even if you don't have those amenities to go to, maybe you want to like clear the trash out of your side pocket of the car, but there's not even a trash can off. I agree. It's you never go to a gas station, or if you do, it's extremely rare that you go to a gas station where the only thing they're doing there is selling gas, and it's like it never happens.
Excellent research, excellent work. Thank you all for your time. Thank you, folks, that were joining us today. We will be posting a recording of this on the NCST webpage, on the EV Center webpage. And I'm going to ask my colleague here to pull up our last slide. Thank you. This is a QR code that you can scan and keep up to date with all of our events, such as this one. This is the ITS email list. And join us for the next one. We are preparing our next webinar that's going to focus shifting towards heavy-duty vehicles, really thinking about electric truck fleet management and how that is going to be playing out in an uncertain charging infrastructure future. So join us on May 20th at the same time. We look forward to having you, and thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.